What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and we are getting a deluge of new content for Warhammer 40k 10th edition. Over the course of the weekend, we also saw a bunch of information about the Leviathan boxed set. It was put in the hands of content creators. We saw battle reports and walkthroughs released, and just today, we have gotten the datasheets from the Leviathan set and all of the models contained therein. So let's dive into them. There are some that we've seen before in previous spoiler articles, and those ones I will be talking about, but I'm not going to spend too much time on them. I do have a playlist of 10th edition preview content, so you can go check that out if you want to hear my full thoughts when those data sheets were originally released. But let's jump into it. And we do have a consistent Tyranid bias on this channel, so let's dive into the Tyranids first. Starting off, I don't want to say strong, but we're starting off with something. We do have Ripper Swarms here. These guys have been nerfed pretty significantly. They did get extra attacks, but have moved down to toughness and strength of 2. If they do equip their spine maws, they do attack 4 times within 6 inches, hitting on 5s at strength 3, but otherwise it's just a move 6. T2, 6-up save, 4 wound, leadership 8. Unfortunately for them, OC 0 unit. It doesn't look like the design team wants to push Rippers as this unit that can hold backline objective. So instead they interact with objectives using the Chitinous Horrors ability, which halves the objective control characteristic of enemies engaged by the Ripper Swarm. Unfortunately, that doesn't make Ripper Swarm super useful, but they do have the core Deep Strike ability, and as we've seen with the secondary objectives in the new mission format, units at Deep Strike can score random tactical secondary missions are actually going to be super useful. So this might actually be a use case for Ripper Swarms. They're not going to be good at holding objectives. They don't really interact with objectives almost at all. They can't take an objective by themselves. They need another unit to help them out to do that. And they do support that unit, but they don't add any OC value of their own, which is sad. But they can maybe Deep Strike and do some secondaries. We can see here as well the backside of their data sheet, which does specify that they come in units of 3 to 6, so the big swarms of 9 Rippers are unfortunately dead. The Screamer Killer Carnifex is a data sheet that we have seen before. This guy's a big move 8, toughness 9, 2+ save, 10 wound, leadership 8, OC 3 monster. Now that leadership 8 value is pretty poor for Tyranids, but we do have to remember that the intention is that they are going to be in synapse range most of the time, which gives them a 3d6 leadership check instead of a 2d6, which actually makes leadership 8 an incredibly strong number. In the shooting phase, they have a bioplasmic scream that allows them to shoot 18 inches for d6 plus 3 attacks. It is an assault and blast weapon, so they can fire it after advancing. Hitting on 4s, it's strength 8 AP2 for 1 damage, and they have the Death Scream ability, which after they shot, if they hit with one of their attacks, they force a battle shock test at -1 leadership on whatever they shot at, which is going to be pretty useful, especially in concert with some of the other abilities that we see later on in this video. They also, in melee, have an impressive 10 attacks, hitting on 3s at strength 10, AP2, 3 damage. The real question is what support we have for Screamer Killers, because the Screamer Killers in the 9th edition codex were very good once granted rerolls. It's a lot of attacks, but unfortunately it's extremely swingy, especially as that sort of middling AP value without any support. They don't really have any options on the backside of their data sheet, and we can see that they can only be taken in units of 1. So it looks like the Monster Squadron rule that we saw from 9th edition is basically going the way of the dodo, and we've also seen some vehicles that previously in 9th edition vehicle squadrons and were able to be taken in multiple units, that those can no longer be doubled or tripled up on. So you're locked up to 3 Screamer Killer Carnifexes, it looks like, unfortunately. The Psychophage is the other big monster in the boxed set, and unfortunately, I think this guy's looking a little bit lackluster. He has a move 9, toughness 9, 3+ save, 10 wound, leadership 8, OC 3 monster. However, it does have the Feel No Pain 5+ ability. So at toughness 9 with 10 wounds, those 10 wounds are going to go kind of a long way. It's a little bit tanky. It does have the Biostimulus aura, which is mostly the reason you're going to be taking this guy, and it does grant a 6+ Feel No Pain to all Tyranids within 6 inches of him. And if you have large wound count units, things like maybe big bricks of Tyrant Guard or Warriors or even large monsters, having a Psychophage in your list to grant that 6-up Feel No Pain on basically your whole army is pretty useful. This guy might see play specifically for that reason, but he's not doing it for his weapons. Before we get into the weapons, he also has the Feeding Frenzy ability, which gives him +1 to hit in melee against targets below their starting strength. So hopefully you can shoot shoot something and kill them in the unit before the Psychophage charges in, and then that'll buff up its melee attacks. And then if it's below half strength, it also gets +1 to wound, which it will need because its strength is unfortunately abysmally low. It does have the Psychoclastic Torrent in the shooting phase, an ignore cover torrent flamer weapon. This is a 12-inch range, basically heavy flamer at strength 6, d6 shots, strength 6, AP 1 for 1 damage. And again, that AP 1 is going to go pretty far because of the ignore cover. It's in most cases going to be similar to AP 2. In melee, it's basically attacking with kind of the same profile, the Talons and Betentacled Maw. It is anti-psyker with devastating wounds, which is kind of cute. Makes it pretty okay against things like Greater Demons, potentially, if you're seeing a lot of Lord of Changes or Keepers of Secrets or Bellacore. We saw those be incredibly strong. Otherwise, if you have randomly like a Librarian inside a Terminator Squad or something, this guy will trigger off his anti-psyker effect, which is cool. But unfortunately for him, the melee attack only is d6 plus 1 actual attack, so there is a significant chance he just fizzles out and doesn't roll high enough to do significant damage. He hits on 3s at strength 6, AP 1 for 2 damage this time, going up in the world, but ultimately not particularly exciting. It's going to be mostly kind of a midline support unit, so the hope is that it is kind of cheap. On the back side of the datasheet, we do see it can only be taken in units of 1 and doesn't have any options, so that's great. The Barbgaunts. We had seen the weapon profile for these guys previously, but we hadn't seen their actual top-line statistics. They are move 6, toughness 4 with a 4+ save, 2 wounds, an 8+ leadership, and OC value of 1. It's a reasonably defensive profile, especially given the fact that they are a ranged unit, so they're probably going to be able to sit and cover most of the time, so they're mostly going to be a 3+ armor save against most enemies. They fire their biocannons, a heavy blast weapon, so they are able to go to ballistic skill 3 if they remain stationary, or at least hitting on the 3s, and potentially can get some additional shots out of that blast keyword. It shoots 24 inches, d6 shots, hitting on 4s at strength 5, AP 0 for 1 damage. Not a particularly inspiring profile, but the reason you're taking them is Disruption Bombardment, which, if you hit an infantry unit, you give them -2 move and -2 to advance in charge rolls. This is almost identical to the Earthshaker cannon effect. In fact, I think it's identically the same roll. In melee, they are nothing special. They have a single attack hitting on 4s at strength 4, AP 0, 1 damage. On the back, we see that we can't take them in units of 5 to 10, so hopefully, again, that they are cheap enough that you can take these big bricks of them, and hopefully they can split fire as well, because that Disruption Bombardment is, in fact, checked for each model. You don't have to select a single enemy unit that was hit by an attack. It just hits everything that you did hit, so having a big unit of Barbgaunts split fire into a lot of enemy units can actually be pretty useful for you. Moving on, we have Termagaunts. Now, this is a pretty weird datasheet, and it's nice that we finally have confirmation of exactly what their datasheet does, because it was an open question up until this release. We basically saw, I think, 3 separate datasheets for Termagaunts throughout the spoiler season, and didn't really have any idea of exactly what they did. But now we have confirmation that the one that they originally showed off, that includes the Skulking Horrors ability, is the correct one. There was one with Ripper Swarms within the unit. That one is not the one to be used here, and it looks like that's also not the one to be used in Combat Patrol, because we didn't see it in the Combat Patrol video that was released on Warhammer Community. Now, they are move 6, toughness 3, 5 up save, 1 wound, 8+ leadership, but OC 2 infantry. Importantly, though, they are not battle line infantry, so you can only take 3 units of Termagaunts, which is pretty wild. With their profile, I don't know how many you'd actually want to be taking, especially because they don't have any special objective interaction like most of the battle line infantry in the game that we've seen. They have a wide variety of ranged weapons, either their Flesh Borer, a strength 5, AP 0, 18-inch range, 1 attack assault weapon, their Spine Fist, which are both assault pistol and twin-linked keyworded. This is actually might be the best one, which is maybe the first time that we see Spine Fist actually be useful, mostly because of the fact that they do have that twin-linked keyword. Assault means that their 12-inch range, which is relatively low, isn't going to be such a big deal because you can advance and shoot it. They shoot 2 times a piece, hitting on 4s, and that strength 3 is pretty low, wounding most of the game on 5s or 6s, but twin-linked means that you get to reroll the wound roll. The Termagant Devourer is back in a little bit of a way. It is 18-inch range, 2 attacks, hitting on 4s at strength 4. In melee, they aren't very inspiring, 1 attack hitting on 4s at strength 3, AP 0, 1 damage. But they do have the Skulking Horrors ability. Once per turn, when an enemy unit ends a normal move, advance, or fall back within 9 inches, they can make a normal move up to D6 inches, which can make them kind of hard to shoot at, kind of hard to charge. They can jump in around terrain and make it difficult for your opponent to engage with you, which is pretty interesting. Or if your opponent tries to contest an objective, you can just put more Termagaunts on the objective and use that as a little bit of an extra springboard. On the flip side of the card, we can see that they can take the weapon upgrades, but only if the entire unit replaces their weapons. In the past, we have seen some optionality and the ability to mix and match units into the unit of Termagaunts. Normally, you wanted to keep them as cheap as possible, so you never switch their weapons, but they can also only be taken in units of up to 20, so the big bricks of 30 Termagaunts are gone. The Neurotyrant is a much more exciting data sheet. This guy looks actually pretty sweet. He does have a bevy of keywords. He's not only a monster and a character, but also he's a fly and has the Psyker and Synapse keywords. So he is going to be broadcasting that improved leadership aura, and as we've seen from the spoilers in the past, he can also point that at other units. He's movement 6, toughness 8, with a 4+ save and 4+ invulnerable save, 9 wounds, a 7 leadership, and an OC value of 3. He has, in the shooting phase, a Psychic Scream. This is a very impressive psychic attack. It is an Ignore Cover Psychic Torrent, so basically a big old heavy flamer. 18-inch range, firing 2d6 shots at strength 5, AP 1 for 2 damage. Pretty good, especially with that Ignore Cover keyword, against medium infantry. So there's things like intercessors are actually going to be torn up by this guy. Unfortunately, only strength 5, bounces pretty easily off heavy armor. In melee, the Neurotyrant swings with 6 attacks, hitting on 3s to strength 5, AP 0. For 1 damage. Now, some things that we've learned about it in the past are its special abilities. The most important one is the interaction with the Neurocytes, I think is what they're called. The 2 little friends who are chilling next to him. Those are actually tokens for his Synaptic Relays ability. This allows you in your command phase to select up to 2 Tyranid units within 12 inches of the Neurotyrant's unit. You can actually extend this off of its bodyguard models and counts those 2 units as being in Synapse range. Now, the important thing about this, and if you watch my video that I released earlier today, talking about the command phase, this actually takes place before the battle shock step of the phase. So if you have models that are, or units that are below half strength, and you're worried about them failing their leadership, if they're within 12 inches of any model in the Neurotyrant's unit, before they take their battle shock check, you can actually force them into Synapse. Now, we also saw his Psychic Terror ability. This gives you -1 to battle shock tests for Shadow in the Warp specifically, not for any other reason, but the once per game Shadow in the Warp, the Neurotyrant would actually buff that, which is good, because that ability is otherwise not that exciting. The Node Lash gives +1 to hit to the unit he is attached to, and if your target is battle shocked, it also adds +1 to wound. We're hoping for some additional interaction with the battle shock mechanic in Tyranids, maybe some additional weapons that can force battle shock checks, or Psychers that can force battle shock checks, so you can really be overloading even good leadership values with lots of battle shock and then trigger these battle shock matters kind of abilities. Now, the backside of the card doesn't have any important information except that the Neurotyrant can join Neurogaunts and Tyrant Guard. Tyrant Guard could be interesting if they have a similar profile to the one that they had in 9th edition, and a similar level of synergy where you're able to buff them with a lot of additional attacks. A Neurotyrant leading a unit of Tyrant Guard could actually be really cool. Giving them +1 to hit and +1 to wound with some high strength, high AP attacks would be absolutely awesome. So hopefully, cross my fingers for Tyrant Guard to be good, but we'll have to see later on this week when their datasheet is fully spoiled. The Von Ryan's Leapers are probably the most interesting release out of the Leviathan set. They are an infantry unit with a very impressive top-line profile. Move 10, toughness 5, with a 4+ save, 3 wounds, leadership 8, and an OC value of 1. In melee, they swing with their Leaper Talons. This is a 6-attack melee weapon, hitting on 3s at strength 5, AP 1, but unfortunately only 1 damage. They have a 6+ invulnerable save built in because they're so jumpy, and they have the Pouncing Leap ability. This gives them the use of Heroic Intervention for 0 CP. The Heroic Intervention doesn't grant you the charge bonus, so they don't count as having charge. That's okay because they have the Fights First ability built in. So even if they are charged, they're going to be able to fight enemy units first. And that is also super useful because they themselves are infiltrators, so they're going to be able to deploy up ahead of your army. Now, if we don't see many other infiltrators in the Tyranid stable, these guys are already sort of automatically going to be useful. We saw Gene Stealers, which previously had infiltrators, move down to scouts, so they get a pregame move instead of the forward deploy. But the infiltrator's ability obviously is much superior. The combination of abilities is actually super duper useful for these guys. We can see on the backside, they don't have any war gear options, but they can be taken in units of up to 6. I think generally speaking, you're going to want 1 to 2 units of 3 of these guys just to act as utility models. And the hope is that, again, they're not super expensive. These feels like maybe a 35 point per model unit, which is a little pricey, but for what you get for them, it's probably worth it. Next up, we have the Neurogaunts. We saw these guys' special ability spoiled previously, as well as some of their profile, and unfortunately, they don't have much else going on. They are move 6, toughness 3, 6 up save, 1 wound, leadership 8, OC 1 infantry. They have 1 melee attack in close combat, hitting on a 4 at strength 3. Really nothing going on here, unfortunately. And they have the Neurosights ability, which grants them Synapse while within Synapse range of a Synapse creature from your army. You can join these guys with the Neurotyrant, and they will project the Neurotyrant Synapse from themselves, so you extend his range a little bit. But the Neurotyrant also is there mostly to point out the targeted Synapse effect, so I don't know how much you need the Neurogaunts to do it, to be honest. On the backside, we see that they can be taken in large units of up to 22, and this is a weird thing about these Leviathan datasheets. They actually call out these champion-style units, so in this case, you have 10 Neurogaunts and 1 Node Beast, but the Node Beast doesn't have any actual special rules. Sergeants are basically the same way. They will call out a sergeant specifically in the unit composition, but the sergeant isn't any different. And moving on, last but not least, we see the Winged Tyranid Prime. Now, this model is pretty dope. His move 12, toughness 5, 4+ save, 6 wound, leadership 7, OC 1, infantry character with fly and synapse. He has the deep strike ability, so he can drop in on the table if he wants to, and he's a leader, and we'll talk about the units that he jumps into later on. In melee, he's swinging with his prime talons, which are respectable. It's a 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, it's strength 6, AP 1, for 2 damage. While he's leading a unit, he grants sustained hits 1 to the unit. Now, a big open question right now is how this interacts with other sustained hits from other sources. For example, the Tyranid detachment ability can also grant sustained hits, so whether or not that means that you get sustained hits too, we don't actually know. That's not covered in the rulebook. Importantly, this is all weapons that are equipped to his unit, so it is both ranged and melee. Death Blow is his other ability, allows him to make a fight on death on a 4+. Now, on the flip side of his card, we can see that he can join into units of gargoyles, which I think is both cool and thematic, and granting sustained hits to a unit that may have just a boatload of flesh borer shots and some other special abilities could be cool. But most excitingly, into warriors. Now, the warriors are split into 2 data sheets, as we can see here: melee bioweapon warriors and ranged bioweapon warriors. This is probably to differentiate the profiles between guys with double melee weapons and guys with a melee weapon and a ranged weapon. But the fact that he grants that sustained hits effect to all of your attacks, including your ranged weapons, it means that he could be good in a big brick of warriors as a big shooting bank. That is, of course, assuming that he's not entirely supplanted by the Foot Tyranid Prime, which may just have the same abilities. So that is all the Tyranid data sheets. Honestly, I'm not super impressed by them. We'll have to see the rest of their data sheets, hoping that there's some really good armor cracking in there, because as we're about to talk about, these guys don't really hold a candle to the Space Marine side of the Leviathan box set. So jumping into the Space Marines, we can see the Captain in Terminator armor. We have talked about this guy in the past. He has a wide variety of melee and ranged weapons, including Stormbolters and combi weapons, and Chain Fist power weapons, relic weapons, Thunderhammers, and Twin Lightning Claws in melee. You're going to be taking the relic weapon and Stormbolter if you're kitting him out according to the Leviathan model, however. He has the Rites of Battle ability, which allows you to target his unit with a stratagem once per battle round. Unfortunately, you can only use the ability once across your whole army, so if you have multiple captains and multiple units, you don't get multiple uses of the free stratagems, but it does stack with Gilliman's free stratagems. So you can have up to 3 free stratagems per battle round if you also have Gilliman in there. He gives reroll charge rolls for his unit, which is good because he's probably going to be in Terminators and deep striking, and he can equip a relic shield, which gives him +1 wound. He's a 4+ invulnerable save already, or an auxiliary grenade launcher, which gives him the grenade keyword and lets him shoot mortal wounds at people. On the backside, we can see all of those weapon options represented, and we can also see that he can join Relic Terminator Squads, Terminator Assault Squads, and Terminator Squads. It is interesting that we get confirmation that the Relic Terminator Squad still exists. The Terminator Librarian is another profile that we've already seen. He does have access to the combi weapon and Stormbolter, just like the Captain. In melee, however, he's equipped with a Force weapon, which is a Strength 6 AP1 D3 damage melee weapon. He himself has a Psychic Hood, which gives a 4+ Feel No Pain against psychic attacks. He also grants sustained hits 1 to the unit he's attached to, so he gives them that exploding 6's effect, importantly on all of their weapons, so both shooting and in melee. On the backside of his card, we also see that he can attach to the same squads that the captain can, although he doesn't have a multi-attachment ability like we've seen from some other kind of mid-weight characters in other factions. So if he's attached to that Terminator squad, you cannot also attach the captain to them, unfortunately. Next up, the Infernus Squad. This is another one that we have seen. These guys have a base intercessor profile and mount a Pyre Blaster, an ignore cover torrent flamer, firing D6 shots with strength 5, AP 0, 1 damage. They also select one infantry unit hit by their attacks after they shoot, and that unit must take a battle shock test. Importantly, this is select one, unlike the disruption bombardment from the Barbgaunt unit, so you don't get to force tests on everything that you hit. It's only one enemy. On the backside, again, we see this a little bit of an odd composition. They can take one sergeant and then 4 to 9 Infernus Marines, but the sergeant doesn't have any special rules or special equipment, so why he's called out is a little bit funky. Moving on to the Sternguard Veteran Squad, and these guys absolutely slap. This profile is super cool. They again have the standard intercessor profile, 6-inch move, toughness 4, 3+ save, 2 wounds, a 6+ leadership, and an OC value of 1. But where things get really interesting are their special weapons. They're able to equip combi weapons, which are identical to the profiles that we've talked about previously, but they're also equipped with Sternguard bolt pistols and the Sternguard bolt rifle, which is much more interesting than that silly combi weapon. The Sternguard bolt rifle is both assault, heavy, and rapid fire 1 with the devastating wounds keyword. So if it's able to advance and shoot without penalty, if it does not and remains stationary instead, it gets +1 to hit, and as long as it gets within 12 inches, it's firing 3 attacks rather than its normal 2. So this is just basically a bolt rifle, but better in every single way. And their Sternguard bolt pistols retain that devastating wounds ability. They are strength 4, AP 1, hitting on 3s. So they could go down to hitting on 2s, and they could go up to 3 attacks apiece. And 6s to wound automatically convert that attack into mortal wounds. The Sternguard heavy bolter gets the heavy bolter profile that we've seen elsewhere, but retains the devastating wounds characteristic. So while it hits on 4s with 3 attacks normally, with sustained hits, it does get that 6 converting its attacks into mortal wounds. And for a 2 damage weapon, that's pretty useful. In close combat, they're no slouches either. They attack 4 times, hitting on 3s at strength 4. But the most interesting thing about the datasheet is their bolter drill ability. Once per battle, in your shooting phase, after the unit has shot, if it destroyed an enemy unit, it can shoot again. Fortunately, that is once per battle. They don't get to double tap multiple times, but you can sequence these guys at the end of your shooting phase and use them potentially to kill a unit with Oaths of Moment. If you have Rute Gilliman, you can actually Oaths of Moment 2 units. You can have them destroy a unit with Oaths of Moment, full rerolling, and then once they do, retarget the Oaths of Moment, and then have the Sternguard Veteran Squad shoot again. Now again, the price is key for these guys. If they are too expensive, it's going to be a little bit tough to fit them into lists, but if they are a reasonable cost, I could see them slotting in as just a real good kind of all-rounder gun platform. On the back of the datasheet, we do see that they can all take combi weapons if they want, and they can take 1 heavy bolter out of every 5 models. Now, it is a little bit sad we have lost access to their other heavy weapons. On the flip side, this new profile is very cool. The Ballistus Dreadnought, we have also seen before. It's a move 8, toughness 10, 2+ save, 12 wound, leadership 6, and OC 4 walker vehicle. It does have the damage characteristic, so once that 12 wounds is reduced down to 4, it's going to get -1 to hit. However, if it targets units above half strength, it rerolls hit rolls, kind of focusing on the Alpha Strike. The weapons it's shooting with are its Ballistus Missile Launcher, either a Strength 10 crack missile with 2 shots at AP 2 for D6 damage, or a 2D6 Strength 5 AP 0 blast attack, as well as a Ballistus Las Cannon, a 2-shot Strength 12 AP 3 D6 +1 Las Cannon profile. On its hull-mounted weapons, it also has twin Storm Bolters. This is a single Storm Bolter profile, so 2 shots at 24 inches with rapid fire 2, so within 12 it's firing 4 attacks, but it has the twin-linked weapon ability, so it's going to be rerolling all of its wound rolls, which is pretty useful. The Terminator Squad is another profile that we have seen previously. These guys are able to equip a variety of both melee weapons and interesting ranged weapons, including an assault cannon, a devastating wounds 6-shot strength 6 AP 0 1 damage ranged attack, or a cyclone missile launcher. Fortunately, these weapons don't have that ballistic skill penalty that we saw previously, so they're not relying on the heavy keyword to hit on 3s. They just hit on 3s normally, which is pretty useful. They have the Teleport Homer ability, which allows you to set up a token on the battlefield at the start of the game. It has to be outside your opponent's deployment zone, and it allows you to rapid ingress for 0 command points as long as they come in within 3 inches of that token. Fortunately, it is within 3 inches, not wholly within 3 inches, so only one model actually has to be near the token, and the rest of the unit can string out to be in an interesting or annoying place. And with their new T5 4+ invulnerable save profile, these guys aren't really going anywhere very fast, so oftentimes, if you don't give your opponent line of sight with their biggest guns, you can drop these guys down in a pretty aggressive position and survive a little bit of small arm shooting before charging in. They have the Fury of the First ability as well, which allows them to ignore modifiers to their ballistic skill or weapon skill characteristics and hit rolls. In addition, if they fire at whatever their the moment target is, they get +1 to hit. They're already rerolling hit rolls at that point, so they don't really need that, but it does make their attacks a little bit more efficient. On the backside, we can see that we can take them in units of up to 10. This time, the Sergeant actually has different weapons. He has a power weapon instead of a fist, although it appears that you can switch that with a chain fist if you want the anti-vehicle profile. And for every 5 models in the unit, you can equip 1 heavy weapon. That's either a cyclone missile launcher, a heavy flamer, or assault cannon. You can't take both. Next up is the Combi Weapon Lieutenant. This is the Phobos Lieutenant from the set, and this dude is absolutely wild. They pulled out all the stops when designing this guy because he has every special rule imaginable. He's a move 6, T4, 3+ save, 4 wound, leadership 6, and OC 1 infantry character with the grenade, smoke, and Phobos keywords. He has a combi weapon, which has the same combi weapon profile we've seen otherwise, but it hits on 3s rather than 4s, and his paired combat blades, a swing 5 times in melee, hitting on 2s, and only strength 4, AP 0 for 1 damage, but he is anti-Tyranid 4+, so he's going to be real good in that Leviathan kit. He also has the sustained hits effect with that, so he's going to be getting exploding 6s. Feel No Pain 5+, which is interesting on a 4-wound model. Infiltrators, lone operative built in, so he doesn't require any special triggers for it. He just can't be attacked outside 12 inches. And the stealth ability, so even if you are within 12 inches, you are -1 to hit him with ranged attacks. They're really trying to make that T4 4 wounds go as far as possible. It is funny he has the smoke keyword as well. He can give himself cover, I guess, for 1 CP anytime he's shot at. He has the priority objective identified ability. This allows you at the start of the first battle round to select 1 objective marker on the battlefield. It gives you a 6-inch aura of reroll wound rolls of 1 when targeting enemy units that are within range of the priority objective. This is 1 or more units with the ability, so you unfortunately don't get multiple priority objectives if you have multiple Phobos Lieutenants, but it does give you a way to get their reroll 1's aura from previous editions back in a little bit of a more limited sense. He also has the Evade and Survive ability, which allows him to once per turn make a normal move if an enemy ends a normal move, advance, or fall back within 9 inches of him. So basically like that Termagant ability that we saw previously, but it is not a random distance. It just moves him 6 inches. That makes him incredibly difficult to pin down, and especially with that lone operative effects, it basically makes it so that you can't really get within like 9 inches at all if you want to shoot him, because he'll just move outside 12, and then you can't shoot him at all. On the back side of his card, though, we can see that he cannot be selected as your warlord, and he's also, importantly, not a leader. So it's good that he has that lone operative built in because he cannot join a unit. He's only there to grant that reroll 1's aura. Honestly, a very cool profile for this guy. Yeah, he definitely fits that kind of Rambo vibe, like this wild man surviving in the Tyranid-infested wilderness for a really long time. Very flavorful and very cool. He's also got some local knowledge because he's able to identify which area of the board you need to focus on, so he can kind of inform the other troops that are arriving in his area. I think it's really cool. I wish we'd seen some stuff like this from the Tyranid side, because this dude, well, I don't know if he's going to be super competitively viable. He is very interesting. Last but certainly not least, we have the Apothecary Biologis. This is an interesting apothecary profile because it doesn't feel like an apothecary at all. This guy's really much more about studying his enemies than he is about healing his friends. But this is the Gravis Armored Apothecary. He is a Gravis infantry character with a 5-inch move, toughness 6, a 3+ save, 5 wounds, a 6+ leadership value, and an impressive OC value of 3, actually. Much higher than most of the other characters we've seen. And OC is kind of this guy's whole deal. In the shooting phase, he can attack with an Absolver bolt pistol. This is a 1-shot pistol weapon, shooting 18 inches at strength 5, AP 1 for 2 damage. And in close combat, he has 4 attacks at weapon skill 3, strength 4, AP 0 for 1 damage. However, he gives his entire unit lethal hits, which is very good, especially because he is Gravis and he does have the leader ability, so he can join aggressor units. So we can see Bolt Storm aggressors with a huge swath of attacks be incredibly powerful with this dude. Now, the other amazing ability that he has, and the reason that you want him in these combat-focused units, is his Vivis Spectrum ability. This converts his objective control of a characteristic to 9 if his unit ever destroys an enemy unit in melee. So attaching him to a unit with these big, powerful Power Fist attacks is going to give him the best shot at killing an enemy unit in melee, which then makes him incredibly good at holding down objectives. And again, I like the flavor of this ability. They've really kind of captured the top-down flavor of these characters pretty well in this set. It gives you a little bit of a mini game. It's fun to unlock those abilities over the course of the game, especially for a unit that's like move 5 and is going to be attached to a move 5 unit that will maybe have some trouble actually getting into melee. The interesting thing about him, though, is that he is an apothecary, but he doesn't have any ways to like heal his unit or regenerate models. Would have been nice to see him have a little heal D3 to a model or something, just in order to capture that apothecary flavor. It's strange to have an apothecary on the table that doesn't actually do any sort of defensive support like that. On the back side of the card, we can see the units that he can attach to. They're all the Gravis units. He can attach to aggressors, eradicators, or heavy infantry squads, and he does have the double attachment rule. So this is what we were missing off the Librarian. If you have a captain or chapter master in the unit, you can also attach the apothecary. That means you can actually build a pretty impressive brick of aggressors, potentially with a Gravis captain or Gravis chapter master, to really buff those dudes up and stack that lethal hits effect with some of the effects that the captain's going to be able to give you. I think we're maybe looking at Gravis being a particularly impressive profile in this edition, especially given the fact that they can jump out of Land Raiders now. That'll be pretty cool to see, and I'm kind of hoping for big Gravis units to be useful. So with that, those are all the data sheets that we got from the Leviathan starter set. Let me know down in the comment section, which data sheet are you looking forward to most out of the Leviathan set? Big thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are great and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.